do we need trade agreements do we need more trade agreements in order to stimulate the exports that we so desperately need more of?
Well, so at its heart of most trade agreements is a reduction in the import duties. That's essentially what you get. That really overcomes one part of the transaction cost of moving your product from South Africa to Europe or wherever it may be. What we need to do is become more competitive. Trade agreements then provide an extra little bit of benefit by reducing that cost to get your goods in. But beyond that, they don't do that much. So we have a lot of trade agreements and we don't utilize them very well. So I think rather than adding to the bundle of trade agreements that we have, we've got to ask the question, why is our utilization of the existing agreements so poor? And I think, in large part, because we view trade agreements as the giving of a concession of someone else to get things into our market, and we're quite nervous about that, rather than saying it's an opportunity to open another market, and the price I have to pay is to let things in. I had a meeting in Brussels 2 years ago or so with a group of trade agreement negotiators on their side. They raised the concern that the utilization of the EU's trade agreements was too low, but their primary concern was that European manufacturers were not using the trade agreement to source cheaper raw materials, which would make them more competitive. So, yeah, I don't know if that helps.
But if utilization of trade agreements is low in South Africa and it's also low in Europe, what can countries do in order to increase it? I mean, is it an easy thing to do?
Well, we shouldn't think of trade agreements as being primarily economic. You should think of it more like a medieval arranged marriage than you should about a marriage of love. So there's a lot more politics that go into trade agreements than economics. And so we need to kind of cap our expectations on how much a trade agreement can yield, because that very often is not the objective. But we see the US, for example, when someone does something that they like, then the US wants to set up a trade agreement. We got very upset when we thought we were going to, I suppose, still potentially could lose AGOA benefits. But the reality is, in hard cash terms, AGOA, which is of course not technically a trade agreement, but the hard cash benefit to South Africa per year is about 2 billion rand a year. Almost all of that is concentrated in a small number of companies and in a very tiny subsector of the market. So another way to look at it would be to say whether we have AGOA or we don't have AGOA has no material impact on South Africa, other than the signal it sends, but the numbers don't bear out that something like AGOA really makes a difference.